Detective set the evidence bag down on the table in front of me, and I felt the room tilt. "Mr. Harmon," he said, "do you recognize this?" I did. I recognized it because I had seen it before, sitting on my kitchen counter 3 weeks ago, next to a casserole dish my daughter-in-law had brought over, a small amber prescription bottle, except the label on it wasn't for any prescription I had ever been given. I need to back up, because none of this makes sense unless you understand what my life looked like before that morning. Before I tell you what was in that bottle, and why a detective was showing it to me in a conference room at the Maricopa County Sheriff's Office, tell me something. Where are you right now? What time is it where you are? I'm asking because I know people listen to stories like this at all hours, and the truth is, what I'm about to tell you, I still haven't fully processed, and I've had 8 months to try. I'm 64 years old. I retired early, 61, after 31 years working as a civil engineer for the city of Phoenix. I wasn't rich. I had a pension, a modest 401k, a house I'd owned for 22 years in a quiet neighborhood in Chandler, Arizona. My wife Carol passed from ovarian cancer in 2019. That was the hardest thing I'd ever been through. I thought nothing could touch that kind of pain. I was wrong. After Carol died, my son, my only child, became everything. His name is Derek. He was 34 when all of this happened. He worked in commercial real estate, did well enough, had a nice apartment in Scottsdale. He married his wife, Amber, 6 years ago. I walked him down the aisle. I gave the toast. I cried the ugly kind of crying that embarrasses everyone, and I didn't care. Amber was charming in the way that some people are charming before you understand what it costs. She remembered birthdays. She brought food when I was sick. She called me Dad after about 8 months, which I loved more than I let on, because after Carol died, my house was very quiet. And the year after I retired, Derek and Amber started coming around more. Every Sunday dinner, sometimes a Tuesday, Amber would cook or bring takeout, and we sit around the table. Carol and I had bought at an estate sale in Tempe in 2003, and sometimes it felt almost like a family again. I didn't question it. A grieving man in his early 60s does not question the people who show up. He is just grateful. Around early last year, I started feeling off. Nothing dramatic at first. Fatigue I blamed on age. Occasional nausea I blamed on something I ate. My hands trembled sometimes, which I chalked up to one too many cups of coffee. I mentioned it to my doctor at my annual physical, and he ordered blood work. Some of my liver enzyme levels came back slightly elevated. He suggested I cut back on alcohol. I had 2 beers a week, maybe, and come back in 3 months. I came back in 3 months. The numbers were worse. He referred me to a gastroenterologist. More tests, no clear diagnosis. The GI doctor mentioned the possibility of early-stage liver disease, but my drinking history didn't support it, and I didn't fit the typical profile. He said we'd monitor it. He used the word idiopathic, which I later looked up. It means they don't know why. Meanwhile, Amber had taken a particular interest in my health. She asked questions, detailed ones, about what medications I was on, what supplements I took, what my doctors were saying. I thought she was caring. I told her everything. She started bringing me smoothies. Green ones, she said, full of spinach and protein powder and things that were good for my liver. She'd leave them in my refrigerator when she visited, labeled in her neat handwriting. Monday, Wednesday, Friday. She said it was easier than me trying to make them myself. I drank every one. Here's something I've thought about 1,000 times since. Carol would have noticed. Carol noticed everything about me, the way I held my coffee mug when something was wrong, the exact pitch of my silence. Carol would have walked into that kitchen, seen those smoothies lined up in the refrigerator, and asked a question I didn't think to ask myself. What's actually in these? But Carol was gone, and I was lonely. And Amber seemed to love me. The thing that saved my life was my neighbor. Her name is Ruth Ann, and she is 71 years old and has lived next door to me for 16 years. She has a garden that puts every other garden in the neighborhood to shame, and she has the kind of blunt, affectionate personality that Carol always said was an endangered species. Ruth Ann had a key to my house because she watered my plants when I traveled. She didn't come in often, never without calling first. But one Saturday morning in March, I had asked her to grab a package from my front hallway while I was at a doctor's appointment. She went in, got the package, and on her way through the kitchen, she noticed something. One of Amber's smoothies had been left on the counter. The lid wasn't fully sealed. It had started to separate, the way those drinks do, and when Ruth Ann leaned in to put it in the refrigerator, she smelled something. She told me later she couldn't identify it exactly. She just knew it didn't smell right for a smoothie. She stood there for a moment, and then she did something that I will be grateful for until the last day of my life. She took out her phone and took a picture of it. Then she poured a small amount into a Ziploc bag she found in my drawer, sealed it, and took it home with her. She didn't call me that day. She didn't want to worry me over what might be nothing. But she kept the bag in her freezer, and she did some research, and 2 weeks later, when my blood work came back even worse, and I mentioned it to her over the fence, she said, quietly, "Carl, I need to tell you something." I sat in her kitchen for 2 hours. She showed me what she'd found. There are compounds, she'd been reading about cases in other states, that can be introduced gradually, in small doses that accumulate in the liver. Some are plant-derived. Some are industrial. All of them are difficult to detect unless you're specifically looking. She had a nephew who was a pharmacist in Tucson. She'd described the smell to him without telling him why. He had said it could be consistent with a class of compounds that didn't belong in food. I want to be honest with you about what happened inside me in that moment. It wasn't anger. Not yet. It was this specific terrible vertigo, like the floor had dropped 6 inches and my body hadn't caught up, because I was already thinking, without wanting to think it, about who made those smoothies. I drove home from Ruth Ann's house and sat in my car in the driveway for a long time. There was still a smoothie in my refrigerator. Amber had been by 2 days before. I hadn't drunk it yet. I did not drink it. I put it in a Ziploc bag, sealed it inside a second bag, and put it in the back of my freezer behind a bag of peas. Then I called a number I hadn't expected to ever need. A private investigator named Marcus Webb, who I'd found 2 years earlier when I had a dispute with a contractor. He'd been efficient and discreet. I didn't tell him everything on the phone. I just said I had a situation I needed help thinking through, and that it involved family. He met me at a diner near the I-10 on a Tuesday morning. I brought the smoothie in a small cooler. I also brought something else, something I'd found the previous night when I couldn't sleep and started going through the mail I'd been too tired to open. It was a piece of correspondence from an insurance broker, not one I recognized. It was a follow-up letter referencing a policy application, a life insurance policy, in my name, with a face value of $850,000. The primary beneficiary listed was Derek Harmon. The policy had been applied for 7 months ago. I had not applied for any policy. I set the letter on the table in the diner and watched Marcus read it twice. "How's your health been?" he asked. I told him about the blood work, the elevated enzymes, the idiopathic diagnosis. The smoothies. He looked at the cooler. "This has to go to a lab," he said. "A real one. Chain of custody matters." "I know. And you can't tip them off." "I know. Do you have any idea?" He stopped. He was careful with his words. "Do you have any financial assets your son might be aware of?" I'd thought about this. The house which I owned free and clear had been appraised at $420,000 in 2023. I had a retirement account with roughly $310,000. A small investment account, nothing extraordinary. But I'd made the mistake, and I see it as a mistake now, of being the kind of father who was open with his son about these things. I had told Derek, when Carol died, what the estate looked like. I had wanted him to know he was taken care of if something happened to me. I had told him everything. Marcus sent the smoothie to an independent toxicology lab in Tempe that worked with attorneys and private clients. He paid for it personally and logged it under his company's account. We waited 9 days. The results came back positive for a compound called pyrrolizidine alkaloids, specifically a concentration consistent with a commercially available herbal supplement called Comfrey, which is legal to sell in the United States but carries FDA warnings explicitly stating it should not be ingested because it causes cumulative, irreversible liver damage. In low, repeated doses, it mimics the progression of natural liver disease. It is slow, it is deniable. And in a man my age, with no other risk factors and no one paying close enough attention, it might have looked, eventually, like nature taking its course. I sat with that for a long time. Then Marcus told me the next part. He'd done some background. The life insurance application had been submitted using a broker in Gilbert, who primarily served clients in the East Valley. The application had been completed online, but the IP address used, his contact at a legal firm had helped with this, traced back to a router in Scottsdale. Derek and Amber lived in Scottsdale. The policy had never been finalized. My signature was required, and whoever had initiated the process had apparently been waiting for the right moment to present it to me, or had planned to forge it, or had planned that I wouldn't be alive long enough to discover the discrepancy. I am 64 years old. I spent 31 years building things, roads, drainage systems, structures meant to hold weight and last. I know how to look at a blueprint and find the flaw in it before it becomes a catastrophe. I looked at this situation the same way. I did not confront Derek. I called a friend. His name is Tom Eckhart. We've been friends since 1987. He's an attorney now, estate law mostly, but he spent 8 years as a prosecutor in Maricopa County before he switched sides, and he still knows people. I told him everything. He listened without interrupting, which is a skill most people don't have. When I finished, he said, "You need to call the sheriff's office, not the city police. The sheriff. And you need to bring the lab report, the insurance correspondence, and your medical records going back 18 months. Let them build the case. You don't build it. What do I do in the meantime?" "You act normal," he said. "You answer Derek's texts. You have Sunday dinner. You drink water and tell Amber the smoothies have been really helping." That was the hardest thing I have ever done in my life. Harder than watching Carol lose weight until she weighed 93 pounds. Harder than delivering her eulogy. Harder than anything because at least grief is honest. What I had to perform was something else entirely. I met with a detective at the Maricopa County Sheriff's Office on a Thursday afternoon. Her name was Detective Ramos, and she had the kind of face that gave nothing away while you were talking, and then gave you the distinct impression, when you finished, that she had processed every single word. She took the lab report. She took the insurance documents. She noted my medical records. She asked me detailed questions about the timeline of the smoothies and when symptoms had begun. She also asked about Derek's financial situation. I didn't know as much as I should have, but when her department looked into it, they found that Derek's brokerage had lost 2 significant commercial contracts in the preceding year. He had taken out a personal loan against his car. There were credit card balances, not catastrophic, but the kind of quiet financial erosion that people hide from their parents, especially from a parent who might start asking questions or, worse, offering to help. The kind of erosion that makes $850,000 look like a solution. Amber, it turned out, had worked briefly at a health and wellness retailer before her current job in marketing. She would have known about Comfrey. She would have known exactly how to source it, how to dose it, how to fold it into something green and healthy-looking and delivered with love. The detectives built the case over 6 weeks. I kept having Sunday dinners. I watched Amber refill my water glass and ask about my doctors. I watched my son, look at me across the table. My wife and I had bought together and smile and ask if I was feeling any better. I smiled back. I told him I thought I was. 2 things happened on a Wednesday morning in late April. The first was that Detective Ramos called me and said they had enough to move forward. They had subpoenaed the insurance broker's records, which confirmed that the application had been submitted using personal details only Derek would have known. They had a search warrant for the apartment in Scottsdale. They had identified the specific Comfrey product, a concentrated powder sold through an online retailer, and found a purchase in Amber's name, shipped to their address from 8 months prior. The second thing was that Derek called me that same morning to tell me he'd made a reservation at a steakhouse in Old Town Scottsdale for Friday night. He wanted to celebrate, he said. My birthday wasn't for another 3 weeks, but he wanted to do something early. I said that sounded wonderful. They arrested Amber at the apartment on Thursday. Derek was taken into custody at his office. I was at Tom's house when it happened. I had not gone home that morning because Tom had told me not to be alone, and I was glad I listened. Tom's wife, Denise, made coffee. I sat at their kitchen table and held the mug with both hands and didn't say anything for a long time. Denise put her hand over mine. She didn't say anything either. That was the right call. In Arizona, what they had done, the deliberate adulteration of food or drink with intent to cause bodily harm, combined with the fraudulent insurance application, constituted multiple serious felonies. The prosecution charged both of them with attempted first-degree murder, fraud, and conspiracy. Amber's attorney argued she had acted under Derek's influence. Derek's attorney argued the opposite. It didn't matter much in the end. The evidence was clear enough that both of them took plea agreements before the case went to trial. Derek received 14 years. He will be eligible for parole, but his attorney told Tom he was unlikely to receive it early given the nature of the charges. Amber received 9 years. I was not in the courtroom when they entered their pleas. Tom said I didn't have to be. He was right. What I did instead was drive out to a stretch of the Tonto National Forest, about an hour northeast of Phoenix where Carol and I used to hike. There's a trail there, not long, that ends at a small overlook, with a view of the canyon that looks different at every hour of the day. We went there on our second anniversary. We went there after Derek was born. We went there the last fall before she got sick, when we didn't know yet that she was sick. And the light that afternoon was the kind of gold that only happens in October in Arizona. I sat up there for about 2 hours. I'm not going to tell you I felt triumphant. I didn't feel triumphant. I felt something more like the silence after a very loud noise, this ringing absence, where something enormous used to be. Derek called me once from a detention facility before sentencing. He'd been allowed a brief call. I picked up because I didn't know who it was. He said my name. Just my name, Dad. The way he used to say it when he was small and had hurt himself and needed me to come. I held the phone. I didn't hang up, but I didn't say anything for a long time. Finally, I said, I know. That was all. I don't know what I meant by it exactly. I think I meant, I know what you did. I know you are my son. I know I would have given you anything you asked for. I know none of that is something I can unknot right now, or maybe ever. He didn't say anything after that. The call ended. My liver function has been improving steadily since I stopped consuming whatever Amber was putting in those smoothies. My GI doctor says the damage is real but not irreversible at this stage. I take this as a piece of luck I did not earn, just received. Ruth Ann came over last Sunday. She brought vegetables from her garden, tomatoes, zucchini, a bunch of herbs I can never identify, but that she insists I know how to use, which I don't. I made pasta. We sat at the table Carol and I bought at the estate sale in Tempe, and ate and talked about her grandson's soccer season and the new family that had moved in 2 houses down, and whether the oleanders on my south fence needed trimming. Ordinary things. The absolute luxury of ordinary things. I want to say something to you before I go, because I think about the people who are listening to this, and I wonder how many of you have someone in your life you trust completely without thinking about it. A child, a spouse, a person who has access to your home, your food, your medical history, the financial shape of your life. I'm not telling you to stop trusting people. I would not have wanted to live my life in suspicion. I would not have wanted to miss those Sunday dinners, even knowing what I know now, because some of them were real. Some of them were just dinner. What I'm telling you is this. Carol would have noticed, and she isn't here. So I have had to learn at 64 to notice for myself. I gave my son everything I had. I would have given him more. I just didn't know he'd already decided to take it. I've had 8 months to sit with what happened, and I still don't have a clean way to explain it. People want a tidy ending to a story like this. They want you to say you've forgiven your son, or that you never will, or that you found peace, or that you're bitter. I don't have any of those things for you. What I have is something quieter and less satisfying, which is that I'm still here, and I'm learning what that means. What I keep coming back to is a simple fact. The choices Derek and Amber made didn't start with poison. They started earlier, with smaller things. The decision to hide the debt, the decision to resent instead of ask, the decision to look at a person who loved them and see a problem to be solved rather than a father to be honest with. Every action has a chain behind it. Every outcome's the end of a long sequence of decisions that felt small at the time. That's not a religious idea. That's just how cause and effect works when you apply it to human beings over years. I think about Ruth Ann. She didn't save my life by doing anything dramatic. She saved it by paying attention on an ordinary Saturday morning. She smelled something wrong in a drink sitting on a counter, and instead of dismissing it, she listened to that instinct. That's a kind of intelligence that doesn't get enough credit. The intelligence of noticing, of not talking yourself out of what your senses are telling you. I had stopped noticing. Grief had made me want so badly to believe that the warmth I felt at those Sunday dinners was real, that I turned off the part of me that asks questions. The bravest thing I did through all of it wasn't going to the sheriff's office. It was sitting at dinner with my son, knowing what I knew and not breaking. That required something I didn't know I had left, a steadiness, a willingness to endure discomfort for a purpose larger than my own immediate relief. I wanted to confront him every single Sunday. I wanted to say his name across that table and wash his face. I didn't, because Tom was right. You don't build the case. You hold yourself together and let the truth do the work. I think that's what resilience actually looks like. Not the dramatic version, the version where you get up, make coffee, answer a text from your son as though nothing is wrong, and then sit in your car for 15 minutes before you trust yourself to drive. You do that day after day until it's over, and then it's over, and you're still there. A little more worn, a little more clear-eyed about what people are capable of, including people you made, people you watched take their first steps across the kitchen floor of the house you still live in. I gave Derek every good thing I had. I want to be careful here, because I am not saying that entitles me to his loyalty or that love is a transaction. It isn't. But I do believe that how we treat the people who have given us everything reveals something true about who we have decided to become. Character isn't inherited. It's built, or it isn't, through 10,000 small decisions over a lifetime. Ruth Ann came over last Sunday. We had pasta. The tomatoes were from her garden. It was an ordinary evening, and I did not take a single second of it for granted. That, I think, is what survives.